Okay, so I am a retired lawyer now. I started out as a lawyer, and I was a transactional lawyer, which meant that I drafted documents. I did not present anywhere in court or anywhere else. I just drafted documents. I mean, I met with clients one-on-one, but that is different. And I had moved from the law firm to the Securities Commission. This is 35 years ago, probably now. And I was there for, a year or two. And then my boss walked in one day and she said, "You wrote this policy. You need to go talk to our industry about it." And I went, "What? I don't do that." But she was my boss. So, of course, I did do it. And I was both terrified and terrible. And I went back, I joined Toastmaster, and became a better presenter. Or rather, a more confident presenter, not necessarily better. And I did standard presentations for lawyers, accountants, engineers with a whole ton of facts and a whole ton of text. And that's what everybody did. And I did that, as I said, for 15 or 20 years before I got training in the brain science behind how people learn and remember. I thought, wow, I don't have to be boring anymore. So I spent my last 5 years at the Securities Commission helping my colleagues there give informative presentations that were memorable and engaging. And then I retired from the BC Securities Commission and started my own business at 61 to help people like me give informative presentations that were memorable and engaging. I love helping people who are just like I used to be. Well, actually, that's a bit narrower than I love helping people give informative presentations that are memorable and engaging. And that can be people just like I am, terrified of presenting, or it can be people who are actually pretty good and just need a tweak or two to get even better, to do an even better presentation. I guess what inspires me is I know that all informative presentations can be memorable and engaging. All it takes are the right tools, which I can share with my clients, the right attitude, that is a willingness to get better, and then practice. But I really believe that no matter how dry or technical the content is, that informative presentations can be memorable and engaging and still convey all the important information that the person needs to share. Yeah, I think the toughest lesson for me was learning to trust myself, because I had been an employee my entire life until I started my business at 61. And so when someone who had been in business longer than me, which at the beginning was like everybody, said, "Oh, you have to do this, or you should do this, or the only way you can be successful is to do this," I did things even though they didn't feel right to me, but someone more experienced as an entrepreneur than me said I had to do them. And that didn't work at all. What I learned over time was essentially there's all sorts of different ways to run a successful business, and I just need to trust myself. And if what I'm being told feels wrong to me, I need to just say, "Thank you for suggesting it," and go ahead and do what I know is right. And if I have questions, find people who can help with the questions I have, but not just assume that everybody, no matter what anybody says, they're obviously right because they're more experienced than me. Yeah, I mean, I think what happened, so after I took the course I mentioned that taught me about brain science, that was about 5 years before I left. And so I was helping part of my job was helping my colleagues do informative presentations that were memorable and engaging. And if that had been my only job, I may not have retired when I did and started my own business. But I had a couple of other things I was doing that I really didn't want to be doing and I couldn't seem to get out of. And I loved that part of what I was doing. And I realized that people at this commission weren't the only people who needed help with their presentation. So I sort of knew there was a market out there, and I knew that if I stayed, I'd end up doing the things I really didn't want to do. And so I thought, I'll just focus on the stuff I really like to do and start my own business doing that. So there's a couple of things, starting with fear. So Ethos 3 has done a study looking at the impact of fear on people's careers. And what they found was that fear of public speaking reduces wages by 10% and inhibits promotion to management by 15%. But it's not just fear that has an effect. Ineffective presentations also have an effect. It can harm a person's career. It can mean they're not seen as the expert that they are. It can mean from the organization's point of view that it harms their reputation or that they lose or don't gain clients. So both fear and ineffective presentations can have a big impact. And of course, for people who are their business entrepreneurs or solopreneurs like me, it's sort of the double whammy. It's the personal effect and the business effect all combined into one. I think the most important things to know are, first, that facts do not persuade, and secondly, that stories enhance learning. So on the first point, the facts do not persuade. The problem is that confirmation bias is a problem. If people have an opinion on something you're talking about, a pretty strong opinion, and you say, here's all the facts why you're wrong and you shouldn't do whatever it is you thought you should, whatever they want to convince you to do, the chances are you won't even see or hear that. And if you do, you are almost certain to discount it. And there was actually an interesting study done of the US presidential election in 2004, where the researchers got an equal number of strong Republicans and strong Democrats and hooked them all up to functional magnetic resonance imaging machines, or fMRIs. And what fMRIs do is they look at what part of the brain is active when, if you, in real time. So then they showed the participants self-contradictory statements by their preferred candidate, George W. Bush for the Republicans and John Kerry for the Democrats, and then looked to see what part of the brain was active in the participant. So the reasoning part of the brain didn't light up at all. What lit up were the emotional circuits in the brain. And when they discovered that, when they figured out how to make those self-contradictory statements actually support their preferred candidate, it was the pleasure part of the brain that lit up massively, reinforcing their original position. So that's why just sharing a whole bunch of facts or a whole bunch of information on its own isn't effective. Which brings us to stories, because stories enhance learning. And I learned about this from Kendra Hall, who spoke at the Toastmasters International Convention here in Vancouver in 2017. And one of the things that she shared was that stories have an effect on the brains of the listeners. So when you are doing a presentation and you share a story, the listeners have an increase, a little blip in cortisol, which is a good thing because that is the focus hormone, and an increase in oxytocin, which is the connection hormone. So if you can build stories into your informative presentation, people will be focused on you as a presenter, paying attention to you, trusting you, and feeling connected to you, and they're far more likely to remember your information if that is the case. So using stories is critical. I have a couple of tools to share with people. I mean, I have more tools than that, but I've got two that I'll share with you today. One is to start the presentation with a relevant, challenging story. So one where there's a pain point that relates to the purpose of the presentation. So that's one, start with a challenging story. Second one is to, when you get to the information part of the presentation, because this is an informative presentation, you're there to share information. When you get to that part of the presentation, it's very important to divide the content into 3 big buckets. And then if you have time, you can subdivide those into smaller buckets. But 3 gives a feeling of fullness and completeness. And 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 or 20 or whatever is simply a list. And most people don't remember lists. Some people use slides as if they are their speaking notes. So they have like every word they're going to say on their slides. And people can read faster than you can speak, and you've lost them the moment you do that. But even using your slides as handouts isn't effective either. So the brain science tells us that the more text and data you put on your slides, the less people will learn and remember, and that people will remember more with image and speech than with say speech alone, or with text and speech, or even image, a whole bunch of text and speech. A little bit of text is fine, but the more text you have, or data, the more text you have, the less people will remember. Yes, absolutely. So the first is to include an image and title on every slide. The second is to the extent that you need more than image and title. And often for informative presentations, you will want at least a few points on your slides, not just a title. And if you do, no more than 3 animated points of 1 to 3 words each. Now, if your audience needs more information than that, and they often will, that additional detail can go into handouts that you send out afterwards. But you don't want all that detail on the slides because people won't remember it, is what the brain science tells us. I mean, if people use the tools that I've shared, so starting with a challenging story, dividing the content into 3 big buckets, having an image and title on every slide, and unless there's a really, really good reason, doing no more than 3 animated points. So coming in one by one, animated points of 1 to 3 words. If they do just that in their next presentation, it will be far more memorable and engaging than what I suspect they were doing before. So this is on the importance of not putting too much text on your slide. So we had a presentation when I was at the BC Securities Commission on crowdfunding. It was coming out of Toronto, and the presenter very nicely talked about the rules in Ontario and the different rules in BC. So we were very happy that the presenter actually recognized that BC existed. And the problem, though, when he got to BC is he got it backwards. He said that the crowdfunding rules applied to a group who couldn't use it at all, and that it didn't work for people that actually were the only people who could use it, like completely backwards. And at the end, I said to my colleagues, that was really odd. You don't often see someone get, if they're talking about something, get it completely backwards. And everybody but one person said, yeah, that was a bit odd, And one person said, no, he got it right. And I said, no, he didn't. And we went back and forth a few times. Yes, he did. No, he didn't. And then my colleague said, oh, I know what happened. I was reading his slides. I didn't hear a word he said. So there is really no point doing a presentation if the people aren't going to hear what you're saying. You may as well just send them an article or something. Like, you shouldn't be wasting your time or theirs if the audience isn't hearing you. And that's the problem with if there's too much text and data. People won't remember or learn what you're there to teach them. In fact, they probably won't even know you said it. Yeah, there was one of my clients came to me and she was speaking on a panel on, not panel discussion, but more panel 3 separate speeches. And it was on clean energy. And she was very worried because she had not done many presentations. And she was on the panel with a couple of people who had done a lot of presentations. And she was the last speaker before lunch. And so the first couple of speakers did their presentations, and by the time she got to do hers, she was feeling very confident because she knew that hers would actually be better than theirs were. And so she did her presentation. She felt really confident. She got praise from the conference organizer who told her what a great presentation it was and how everybody had really liked her presentation. And so to go from, oh my God, I can't really speak on the same panel as these experienced people, to, yes, I can, and I can actually do it better, was very cool. It was a present. Usually when I help people, certainly people who are experienced presenters where I'm just giving them a tweak or two, I help them because by having them do their presentation with me as their audience and then providing supportive feedback. So you did this really well, and here's some ways you can make it better. In this case, I had someone I used to work with at the commission come to me and ask if I could help her daughter. Her daughter was in university. She was terrified of presenting. And she was in a contest for people in the type of course she was in, where she was competing along with her team. She was competing with other business schools. I forget if it was across Canada or in Western Canada, but wherever. It was a whole bunch of business schools. And so I did what I do with people when I figure out whether I can help them or not is something I call an amp-up session, which is an facilitated self-assessment of the memorability they're presenting. So I did that with her. It was clear that confidence was the most important thing. And so I sent her a note that said, what I would recommend is just a couple of training, me training you on things. I can provide you with a whole bunch of confidence tools. And then there's a couple of other things you might be interested in. One was training on organization, and the other was, which includes stories, and then the other was training on stories themselves. And so she chose confidence, of course, because that was the main thing. And then she also chose stories. And so I did a couple of hours of training with her and shared the confidence tools. And then, actually, I think I did it in 2 segments. So I think I did confidence tools first, and then she came back and I said, which of those sort of felt good to you? Because when I do confidence tools, I sort of share, 8 or 10. And then I say, but you should pick one and try it and see if it helps. And if not, pick another and try it. Like, don't try and do all 8 of them at once. That's just crazy. So I was asking her at the beginning which one she sort of felt she'd try, and so she told me that. And then I shared with her the, start with a challenging story that's relevant to whatever the problem you've been assigned to. Because the way it worked is they were in a room for 3 hours. They get a problem. They have to develop a solution, and then they have to presented at the end of the 3 hours. So I couldn't do my usual, do it for me and I'll see, because I'm not in the room. I can't be there. So I just said, start with a challenging story, then use a springboard story, which is a positive story, then do an outline sentence. So anyway, I sort of helped her sort of how she might do it. So when we did a call after, she said that she felt this had really helped her feel able to do her presentation. And in fact, that her team had won. And that one of the judges had said that part of the reason for that was the story that she started with at the beginning of her presentation. So that's pretty cool when someone can go from, oh my God, I can't present at all, to her team winning. Yeah, I think the most important thing I did is when a year or two after that awful presentation I did, the terrified and terrible presentation I did, a Toastmasters club started at my office. And I joined that shortly after it started. I'm still a member of that club. And that is what got me over the terror. So, because in Toastmasters, you're doing speeches every few weeks, and someone in the club is saying, this was really, if it's a good club, someone in the club is saying, that was really good, but it'd be even better if you did X. So that got me over my terror. And then, but I knew, so I was doing confident presentations that were very common for lawyers, accountants, and engineers, i.e. those, lots and lots of facts, lots and lots of text on the screen. And what got me from that to where I am now is that training on the brain science of how people learn and remember. Because I knew when I was doing those presentations that I wasn't really connecting with my audience. And so finding out a way, using that brain science, finding out a way that will connect with the audience really helped me go, well, that's really what took me from just doing presentations to helping others do great presentations too. Well, I think I'd turn it in a slightly different direction. I think everybody can be a memorable and engaging presenter. Like me, though, many people start out being terrified, and so one of the tools that I recommend people, so this is one of the, as I said, I have like 8 confidence or 8 or 9 or whatever confidence tools. This is one of them, but I actually use this, and that is to say a mantra before you speak. And I have a little story that goes with it, if we've got time. So my friend Eloise was an accountant in Gold River. And she was sort of like me at the very beginning. That is, she did presentations. She was not particularly confident. They were filled with all the details. But primarily she was, not confident. So she ended up, so Mill closed in Gold River. She ended up in Vancouver. And she ended up with one of my favorite charities, Dress for Success Vancouver. Dress for Success helps women who are facing challenges in our community get and keep a job and develop a career, and they have a number of different programs. So Eloise became the first client ambassador for Dress for Success. That is, a client who would go out and speak to bigger and bigger groups about Dress for Success and the impact it had on her life. And so she was speaking at one of those events with a lot of people at it. And someone came up to her afterwards and said, you look so calm and confident up there. Didn't you have butterflies in your stomach? And she said, of course I had butterflies in my stomach. Everyone does. All I had to do was get them to fly in formation. So her mantra is fly in formation, and it causes that little giggle. Because, of course, butterflies never ever fly in formation, like it's silly, right? So that little giggle really helps. I actually had a mantra before I knew Eloise. And my mantra is, it's showtime. And I think that causes me to giggle, because for me, that sounds like I'm on a Broadway stage in front of thousands and thousands of people, and wherever I am, it's not there. And with like critics from the New York Times there to criticize everything I do. And so it causes me to giggle, because whatever the situation is, it's not that. And so what I recommend is people find a mantra or use a mantra, either mine or Eloise's, or figure out their own. Preferably one that gives the little giggle, because the giggle helps you get to the right level of nervous energy. If you have no nerves at all, you will be rather robotic. So you don't, that's awful. So you do not want to get to no nerves at all. You want that right level of nervous excitement or nervous energy. And saying a mantra to yourself as often as you need to before you get out on stage. I'm not saying that you would stand in front of your audience saying fly in formation, or whatever. Not saying you do it in front of them, but if you can find a quiet spot, maybe you go to the washroom before you go in front of the camera or on the stage, and say it until you sort of get those nerves down to the right level of nervous energy. In terms of the audience, my tip is slightly different. I've heard that, the picture naked. And that would probably cause a giggle. I'm not sure you really want to do that. What I do think you want to do, though, is think about your audience as your friends. So think about talking to friends. If you're talking to friends, it just sort of flows, right? You say something, they say something. You don't sort of think, oh my God, what am I going to say? Like, you're just talking. And if you can think of your audience like your friends, and you're just having a conversation with friends, that really can help a lot. And I think one way, if you're there in person, it certainly helps to sort of introduce yourself to people and see why they're there and where they come from and all that sort of just small talk stuff to feel more comfortable with the people you're in the room with. It's a little harder online, but you can still do some of that. You can ask at the beginning, where are you from? Or, how did you find out about this? Or what caused you to be here? Or any of those sorts of things, just to settle yourself down, see that everybody there are just people like you wanting to learn, and that they're there because they want to learn whatever you are there to present. Most people do not go to a presentation thinking, gee, I really hope that this will be really boring and I won't learn anything. That's not why people go. People go thinking, I hope this is great, and then I'll learn all sorts of great information. And so if you keep that in your mind and keep your audience as friends in your mind, I think that's the best way to, be comfortable up there. Because what you're aiming for is to have, be comfortable and just converse with your audience, not be all uptight and memorize the whole thing. I do not recommend people memorize at all.